so we're here to talk about we're here to talk about many things that can sort of we can try to cram in the limited time that we have. But you and I were talking about it a few minutes ago. Cloud computing. Yeah, I think the best way would be to sort of in a very generic way, if you can explain it to the audience that we have, or whoever that is listening out there, as to what is cloud computing, and is it the same as software as a service? Is it different than that? What's very basic layman's explanation.
Sure. Basically, यार आपके तीन components हैं. You have three components within the software as a service that you mentioned. For example, is one component. There is the infrastructure as a service. There is now the platform as a service. The platform as a service, for example, is not as pervasive today. There's limited audience for it. There's little need or not as much need, for example, for a platform as opposed to, for instance, infrastructure, which is a much bigger draw in general. So I think corporations are getting into that. Basically, the idea is you take all the hardware and all the blinking lights they used to have and used to fascinate people. You take all of that and you put them, you make it someone else's headache entirely. So you don't have to do any of that headache management, if you will. And essentially, all these providers, and these include service providers, these include these corporations, for example, that have taken up this quote-unquote cause of creating efficient data centers. They've crammed them up with servers, utility servers, including all kinds of different blades, and essentially you can now rent these servers. I can now go in and say, okay, I need a server farm of 50 servers for 2 hours every day.
Okay, so tell me, how is that different than Exodus? The model that did not really go so successful. Covad, all these companies that really started back in the, I'm going to say late 90s now, or maybe perhaps mid 90s, Vinod Mishra and whatnot. And how did that, they were clearly providing you hosting facilities. Some were even sharing as well. Aside from the space, you were actually sharing machine power as well. How is that different now? And why wasn't it successful then? And what's happening now?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why it wasn't successful then is the reason why people speculate that it's going to fall on its face again, and that is that your CPUs, your caches, they're not your data split. They're not designed for sharing. So which is a security issue actually in cloud computing even today. They have these what they call hypervisors. They basically manage. Kashif Saab's data, for example, doesn't get accessed by Shahab or by somebody else. But they have flaws in their designs. And when Vinod and all these other companies, Covad, started this work, it was even more elemental back then. Back then, there was absolutely no concept of division within a server, within a resource. So I think that's one reason why it failed then. There are several other reasons, I'm sure. Now there's a little more marketing power behind this than there was then at that time. Also, there's a natural progression. You see, there's a very nice, a good book written by a gentleman, I forget his name now, but he's actually he's put forth this idea that if you look at, for example, early 20th century, all these big corporations, companies, offices used to have their own generators, electric generators. And what then happened was that the grid came along, and those generators became obsolete. And now everybody basically started taking electricity for granted. In the US market, everybody started taking electricity for granted because it was a free flow, it was available. You use as much as you want, you pay as much as you need to pay for whatever you use. You don't need to, for example, manage and maintain that generator in the back to have your electricity delivered to you. Same concept is being applied now, where there's some commoditization, and there's some marketing power behind that commoditization of compute power. So I think that's the driving force that wasn't there in the 90s.
So the real spin is actually marketing, and do you think governance has a lot to do with it? There have been more bylaws passed in terms of data privacy issues, more debacles have happened which have helped legislating area to actually focus more on governance of this data retention power, or the power to the consumers to actually demand retention of data and proof thereof.
I completely agree. I think it's been a learning curve that obviously has been going up pretty quickly. All these the security breaches of all kinds, the issues and problems, scaling problems that everyone has. When your users have gone up, especially since India and China have sort of come up and started taking up things, resources.
Do you think the evolution of standard would actually change or impact the evolution of mindset change as well? You think that's going to happen?
I think that's going to happen because, when you sit across the table with a vendor, I mean, the very first thing the vendor talks about in this order, your problem, your issue, the product that's going to solve the problem, and all the force that's behind the product.
Sure.
Well, all the force that's behind the product includes, or supposed to include, that stamp of the regulation authority. Now, the lack of regulation in Pakistan, I think, will get driven just like everything else in Pakistan, which is that government, I think, will follow the market and the needs of the market. And at some point, when the market decides, hey, we need that specific certification or audit or whatever it is, whatever stamp we need, I think this is what has happened in the past. Governments have come through and provided them with whatever markets need. What has to happen first, though, is that the cloud vendors in Pakistan have to.
Well, that's the point. There aren't any at the moment.
Well,
there
I think
are regional players. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll give you success rate examples. Salesforce.com, probably a good user base in Pakistan. Successful product, has been there for the last 12 years. Beat down competition hands down. What's really the rate? I mean, how do you see? What do you perceive as the rate of outsourcing or managed services outsourcing in Pakistan? Do you see the rate increasing?
Yeah, I do, because I'll tell you why. There are certain advantages that you get with managed services. You have the optimized businesses and optimized services because they've outsourced some of the stuff to cloud in the US. Now, Pakistani companies are not working in isolation. They're working with the rest of the world. And as go the rest of the world, so goes whoever's providing them services of all kinds, including Pakistan, for example.
Well, I'll give you an example. Financial services.
Yeah.
The State Bank of Pakistan at this point would not really have a very clear guideline, although they are the farthest in terms of regulatory affairs when it comes to information technology. They're really good at it, and they're working really hard at it as well. But cloud computing, sharing data into a third-party environment, there are issues that need to be addressed before the financial. Now, if you look at the history of Pakistan, the financial industry as well as the telco industry have been the only two entities that have always been aggressive in terms of IT spending.
But they had to be, right? Market drove them. They had to be. I mean, the kind of growth that telecom saw, for example, they couldn't manage that kind of growth without some heavy investment in IT. They knew that, and that's what followed, right? I mean, you have, 40 million users in Pakistan? What is it, 40, 50 million, whatever number
subscribers,
it is?
yes.
Yeah, I mean, right. So, I mean, a huge number of users and subscribers. The same thing gets driven by market. Whoever is serving the US market from here, for example, whoever is serving any world market is going to have to, provide those answers.
Tell me something. One can also argue a lot of it is done. Data centers has been done. Must have been 5-year planning that would be placed in it while making it. I mean, you would do it, I would do it.
Yeah.
Applications have been bought. Recurring license fees have kicked in from Microsoft to Oracle to whatever other applications, industry-driven applications that are being used. What is enticing for a CIO today to say, okay, fine, yeah, I'll pick this piece and I'll outsource this until unless a new piece
comes in.
What what is enticing a CIO to say, okay, fine, vendor X, you finally came up with the idea of cloud computing in Pakistan. The rate is not that high. The odds are probably against me in terms of adoption in the country. But I've already bought everything. Where do I go now?
Well, I think what will happen is that, first of all, you said as a new line of businesses open up, it'll be a choice that the CIOs will have. They'll have a choice of working with what they have, the tried and tested, whatever you want to call it, working with these vendors, or going with somebody who's offering them a solution on cloud. So the new lines of businesses, they have that choice. Wherever they have made heavy investments, they have to make a decision on what kind of continued investing I have to do. Maintenance, software maintenance, hardware maintenance, line up all those costs and figure out what exactly I'll be paying over the next 5-10 years, and can I take the hit and save some money in the long run in the next 5 years? Can I save my CFO some money, by divesting myself over this period of time and going to cloud? I don't think anyone's going to jump ship and immediately go to, be on a software solution one day on Tuesday, and on Wednesday morning having coffee with somebody, who's just implemented cloud solution for them. That's just not going to happen. I think it's going to be gradual. I think it's going to be even more gradual for Pakistan. It's going to take a little more time for people to.
What are the impediments? Just as software as a service or cloud computing, what do you think are the impediments, aside from the mindset of CIO, aside from the budgeting and planning, and being able to take that risk in moving forward and sort of experimenting? So what do you think?
I think the biggest ones are security. That's the biggest impediment. That's the biggest impediment in the US. That's the biggest impediment in the West in general. That's the biggest impediment in Japan. Security. That just has to come through. As I said, one example, data encryption. That just has to come through. Again, CIOs have to make a decision about, what will they have to be answerable for all the packages that they have, all the data that they have. And if I give you something that I'm answerable for, I better be sure that you're going to come through.
And you better have the board on your.
Oh, you better have the board on your side. You better have the CFO on board. You have to have the entire organization on board with the idea. The one good thing that has come out of Google, for example, is the ability to monetize your jump from a vendor-based solution to a cloud solution. That is something that they've done very well, and they've marketed that success, which is that they've taken, this is what you're going to save, this is how much it's going to be, let's propose it this way, let's propose that way. They've actually done quite a bit of work.
So you're saying they came up with creative parameters that actually can give the ROI right then and there.
Yeah.
And then begs the question again and again, why wouldn't you do it?
Right. I think to me, as a person who's seen CIOs struggle with their situations and their fires every day, I think the biggest questions they have in cloud are around security. That's the biggest question. They don't have questions around availability as much. They don't have questions around how some of these things are getting delivered. Those questions are there as well. I'll give you another example. There's a gentleman, again, without naming the resource, concerned about data that is being stored in the back somewhere else in another country, for instance. And that's very common with cloud. You see, that's a regulation issue. If your data is getting stored overnight or every week in an XYZ country and not in the country of your business, those are some of the other concerns that come up. But they come up down the road. The first concern that I see CIOs struggle with, who's looking at my data? I'll give you another example. When this breach happened that we talked about before the session at Google when Microsoft released a patch for that. One of the concerns was, okay, whose data got breached? Now let me give you a scenario. If it's my data that got breached, I don't want you to know.
Sure.
Right? And you, on the other hand, if you're on Google Cloud, you would want to know whether your data got breached.
Sure.
But Google can't necessarily divulge that information and say. So these are the complexities that come with all the savings and all the ROI.
But and you're
those are the
absolutely
impediments.
right. You're absolutely right. I mean, key takeaway from all of this is, I think it has to come both ways. I think there are elements in which it can be capitalized. Yeah, there are security issues that have been there for a long time. Yep. Clearly, there hasn't been a mechanism by which a customer would know absolutely where the data is residing or how the data is residing and in what hands is it touching. But then again, we still follow till today the debate in information technology, or most of the CIOs will say, who's watching my administrators? What are they doing with my data? That problem will always be there. Hopefully one day it probably, and we've got tools around it, but the idea is we've got challenges equally built around it as well. Cultural challenges of execution to meet the business demands, which would clearly not allow the impediments that would have to be put in, or the stop gaps that have to be put in from the administrator touching data for a particular time in a particular area. So it has to come both ways as I see it. I think the marketing arsenal has been there, but it's time for cloud computing to effectively deliver. It is delivering in many instances, even in Pakistan as well, but Pakistan having, not being on the part of the gravy train of early adopters, it's still lacking far behind. There are governance issues as well, and there is a lack of vendor availability as well. It's increasing, but it's not there yet. PTCL, there are others as well. IBM has been doing it for a long time. IBM probably would be at the forefront of this. Microsoft is launching it as well. So Oracle has launched it, SAP has launched it. In some cases it's been successful, in some cases the customers have not embraced it. But then again, the same thing, like you said, ROI is not being able to establish. There are challenges, there are mindset of the customers, there is a board relationship with the CIO, and CIO being able to convince and take the risk, and the ROI, effective ROI, which revolves around all of this, which would be the convincing power. मुझे तो ऐसा लगता है कि we have to explain more to Pakistanis overseas than actually non-Pakistanis, because they know the logical terrain far more, they read more.
Yeah, I think people who read more aren't reading enough if they're asking questions like that. They ought to be able to read enough, they ought to be able to visit enough. That's what I mean. अब कोई 18 साल से पाकिस्तान से गया हुआ है और वहीं काम कर रहा है, वहीं जिंदगी गुजारी है उसने, और उसके बाद he bothers to comment about Pakistan's security situation. Excuse me. I mean, you have to come here. You have to.
I mean, why? See, India. I hate giving example of India because India is in a much different paradigm in all the better ways.
So Afghanistan. Let's take Afghanistan.
But you take countries like Chile, countries like Argentina. People have invested.
Yes.
These are not stable. Argentinian economy was in shambles 5 years ago. People were on the road. Thailand, people are investing. People were on the road. There was literally a martial law happening. There are political instability around Indonesia. Indonesia is growing in many ways, but there are political issues in Indonesia.
I agree.
So I don't get it. I don't get it that the label of terrorism and the political unrest, or whatever you want to call it here, which are the local problems of this country. But we have resources. We have resources that can.
Pakistan is not a पाकिस्तान में थोड़े से जो expenses level है ना वो भी different है. I'll tell you, you'd be surprised. Well, I don't think you'd be surprised. I think you'll know. Pakistan is now increasingly more expensive to do business in, as opposed to places like Philippines, as opposed to places like Malaysia, as opposed to places like.
In what way? Our bandwidth
in terms of resources, yeah. Your skilled resources in Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad are more expensive. Now, if you want somebody to go to Jhelum and find a resource, yes, they'll find a resource that's probably.
But that's the point. We will, and we have.
No, but that's what I'm saying. See, whenever we talk about Pakistan, what do we end up talking about? We end up talking about Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad.
I can tell you,
Faisalabad is coming up a little bit.
No. The idea is we need to tap into those resources, train them, but the idea is the opportunities. If we go to the West, the first thing we say, यार पाकिस्तान के operations चला रहे हैं, पाकिस्तान के उसमें दुबई, आप ऐसा करें दुबई में एक front office खोल लें और दुबई में front office खोलने के बाद फिर हम आपके साथ काम करेंगे. यार, I have done business in US of A with a company that had its office in Palestine, Gaza, and we have done business and they have delivered arm's length away from Israel. I can clearly say they have far more political unrest than us.
No, they do. They do. They just, last night I was listening to the news again, unfortunately.
And the cost of doing business, I actually think if you look at the overall total cost of ownership of business, total cost of doing business, you compare Malaysia, you compare Philippines, and you compare Pakistan. 3 countries that you mentioned, Pakistan would beat them hands down. Bandwidth, office space location, resources. You will not have your top archbishops. You will have the rooks as well, and you will have the ancillary resources as well. Combined, you create a blended rate from a services perspective. You will beat them.
No, but the other problem is that, and this is a problem that, for example, one of my colleagues at Open had, which was that there is, they went and hired 2 resources in Pakistan, in Lahore. And it turned out those 2 resources actually came back and said, listen, we're getting more business in Pakistan. That's another thing. The market is coming up. They're providing more alternatives to the Pakistani resources, as compared to the work from the US, for instance. I'll tell you, you need a coordinated effort. We need a coordinated effort in Pakistan. Coordination has to be done at the government level, because that's the kind of push that will provide the kind of investment that you're talking about. You're not talking about the investment of somebody who's starting up a company, bootstrapping a company, for instance, and wants to do business through Pakistan.
No, I'm saying
you're talking about an investment arm that has substantial investment within Pakistan for Pakistan. That's what you're talking about, and that can only be driven, in my opinion, by a mix of government plus these corporations.
Quite frankly, I'll tell you, it's not even for Pakistan. It could be for Pakistan or out of Pakistan. I don't care. I want the people of Pakistan, the technological or IT resource pool of Pakistan to get exposure. Exposure from business planning to execution, to actually running a startup, to failing it, and then to succeeding it as well. There are startups that fail every single day in the West.
Sure.
There will be startups that will fail every single day here. Absolutely. Let it be. Yeah. Maybe 90% of the people that I've met, my friends, people like you, entrepreneurs back in US, or not entrepreneurs but accomplished professionals who are willing to invest and say, yaar, business plan banane nahi aata. When was the last time, the very first business plan that got made, do you think that person knew what he was doing?
Well, the other problem is that, I think
there has to be that level of coaching.
People get lost in processes, yaar. A Facebook hai, no freaking business plan. There's no common,
यार वो तो छक्का लग गया ना. हम तो ये कह रहे हैं कि छक्का लगाने के भी तो मौके इशू हो. मैं तो कह रहा हूँ पाकिस्तान के लिए काम नहीं करना. पाकिस्तान के लिए काम नहीं करना. पाकिस्तान से बाहर काम करना है. लेकिन पाकिस्तान के एक IT रिसोर्स पूल को मुझे एक्सपोजर देना है बाहर का.
I get it.
I'll give you an example. Excellent business model. Think about it. Maybe we'll pitch in money on this. Data cleansing and data mining activities as a service. If there is a confidence that can be built, if that CIO is willing to take that risk, and I'm not saying give me all of the pieces. We actually talked about it in the CIO roundtables. Let's not start with 100%. Let's start with 10%. Remember that 10% rule that we established back in the days? I'm linking to a conversation that we can't discuss here. Until we get too detailed. 10% of your business, carve out 10% of your. That's exactly how Tata started. That's exactly how Wipro must have started. Give me 10% of what you're giving to the other guy, and if I do well, give me 15, give me 20. Each time you give me more business, I'm going to decrease the price. It's the pyramid theory. Cosmetics invented it. We didn't.
No, I realize that, and I think one of the things that has to happen this is one of the things that cloud can, for example, do for Pakistan.
Yeah,
too.
It can.
The whole flattening concept actually comes right around and comes right back to the center, which is. If there is not even substantial, some presence of cloud offering from Pakistan, even if it's for outside Pakistan, aside from the regulation issue, the data mining, for example, And a lot of data mining is being done in Mexico. A lot of data mining is being done in...
You and I both know we can actually have a cloud operation running in Pakistan. We can retain the data in an escrow in the West.
Right.
We can ship that data every single day in a safe location where our customers in US and Europe can actually go and access it. I'll tell you, it's not about, the government is not going to do anything. The government is too busy in doing things to its own. It's a patient that's testing on its own.
Are you talking about the US government or the
Pakistani government? It's not going to do anything. It's going to be the business pool community from both sides to come in and say, look, yes, we've got deficiencies. Yes, we're willing to learn. Yes, and the other side needs to say, look, we're willing to understand your complications, your dependencies, and we're willing to take a step forward and bite chunks and chunks and chunks and pieces and see if we could do something. It has been done. There are excellent examples in Lahore, in Karachi, in which the West is invested in companies. The companies are running. The companies are solely providing services to the West.
Yeah.
You know, there is no hype curve. I don't see that it stops for a while and then it increases. Right. And then when I ask people, why did it stop? यार वो 4 धमाके हो गए यार. यार धमाके तो एक ज़माने फिलीपींस में भी बहुत हो रहे थे. लेबनान में भी हो रहे थे जो आज भी काम हो रहा है. Lebanese engineers are one of the most profound engineers in Dubai.
Well, I've got 4 words for you basically. MIT School of Business. Okay, that is one school where you actually have a lot of good minds that are convinced, for instance, that Pakistan has something to offer. That is a venue in the US, an intellectual thought venue that Pakistan has a foothold in, which is a big thing.
I'll tell you one thing. If through Open, and I'm saying it at CIO office, if through Open you get these 3 or 4 gentlemen to come down to Pakistan, we're going to make sure that they're secure, we're going to get the business community with them, and we're going to have some cohesive plan for 2-3 days to make something happen. Bring them here because they need to see the habitat. We're going to visit 4 or 5 companies. Rabia is going to help us at CIO. Everyone is going to help us. Bring him here. We tell him what's happening here and let them decide.
I don't even have to bring him here. I mean, the gentleman I'm talking about in MIT School of Business comes to Pakistan almost 10 times every year. So I mean, you know, he's been here. He knows this very well. He knows the terrain. I haven't seen him in a past year or so. Like, and what I'm trying to tell you is that seriously, on the East Coast, there are a couple of these schools, Harvard and MIT both, have in their business schools a good Pakistani foothold. The professors there are
which is how it started in India as well.
Exactly how
community attracts community.
Yes.
Community believes in community.
So that has to happen, and I think one thing that I'm taking back from here is that Open New England and Open SV, they're the 2 big chapters.
Sure.
Those are the 2 big chapters that need to coordinate better and find ways to get some of these people in on visits that can be coordinated through institutions like CIO Pakistan.
And I know Open does a lot, and I know Open is trying to do, but quite frankly, I'm not really impressed with the pace. वही हो गया जो मैं और तुम करते थे. Back in the days, we used to sit together in our apartment in Palo Alto and we used to talk about, यार वापस जाने के लिए वापस जाना चाहिए. I think it'll be good. इतना बुरा नहीं हो सकता. Open भी यही कर रहा है. एक हलीम की देग बीच में रखी हो, गोटा लग रहा है. So let's do a little more, you know.
शब्द है.
Yes.